folks, and welcome to this week's show. My special guests today, as you can see, we've got Rod, Jeremy, Pete, and myself. They're not quite as good Fab Four, but you never know. And and we're going to be focusing on the main band themselves, the Beatles. We're going to be ranking the Fab Four's albums, 13 of them, controversially, in order as what we assume to be worst to best. On our last show, the post-Beatles top 10, three of us, Pete, Jeremy, and myself, discussed how we actually got into the Beatles and all the rest of it. So we're not going to repeat ourselves. Just go and watch that show. But Rod's not had the opportunity to explain how he got into the Beatles, and we'd love to hear it, Rod. Come
on. I haven't really got a definitive tale. They're just kind of ubiquitous, aren't they? They're a little bit before my time because I was born in '63, which is the year it all happened, I suppose. But we had songs around, we had singles around the house and stuff. Parents had songs that they were just there. And even when I'd have been like 10, 11, Let It Be was, I think, probably number one in the charts. My Sweet Lord just after that. I've always been aware of them, but I didn't really appreciate them until because I went through my punk and post-punk sort of phase. Like everyone was rubbish, except for what was happening then. Including like the famous sort of John Lydon with his Pink Floyd. Why was it How You Hate Pink Floyd?
I hate Pink Floyd. Yeah, the irony being, of course, he had to buy a Pink Floyd T-shirt to written on it.
I hate on it. I know. but as I've got older, I suppose I've got more into them.
Yeah.
As time went on, you just and then just delved back in what is a kind of a broadly just everyone knows the history, but it's more like going into more detail about it, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then just realizing how the thing is whether you like them or not, and you get all these idiots saying they're overrated and just all sorts of plonkers, but even if you don't like them, you have to appreciate how essential and there's nobody more essential or important than them, whether you like them or not. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I totally agree. For me, they're probably the most important band. Are they my favorite band? No, but they're certainly right up there.
They're in the top three. They're not my favorite band, but yeah,
top 6 or 7 for me. But probably they are the most important, without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt.
So I've kind of just stealthily got into them because how can you not get into them to some degree, I suppose.
Exactly. Right then, the elephant in the room, folks, is the Magical Mystery Tour. So in the UK, it came out as a double EP, and in the US, it came out as an album. And we've had a conversation, and we've decided to go down the album route. Although the rest are going to be based on the UK. And the reason why we've done that is if you go stream the album, it's the American version. And in the UK now, it's the American version that you get. So the double EP version is sort of drifted off, I think is the polite way of saying it. Pete, you were talking before about it being imported. What were you saying?
Yeah, we did say that in the 70s, EMI released an official version, like a copy of the American one, so in the UK. But even in the 60s, I saw one on eBay just yesterday. They imported them from Capital America and put stickers on the front because the demand was so high for the album version. So even in the 60s, you could get stickered versions available from EMI. So I'm surprised it took them until the mid 70s to issue an album.
Yeah, that's bizarre, isn't it? Right, so we're going to go through all 13 albums, folks. Okay, folks, and before we start, just to remind you of the rankings, as you can see on the screen, we've got the rankings from 5 down to 0.5. We ain't going to have a 0.5 stars album on here, but 5 being masterpiece, 4.5 classic, 4 excellent, 3.5 very good, 3 good, 2.5 fair, 2 weak, 1 very poor, 1 awful, and 0.5 don't bother. But as I say, we'll not get to that point. So, Rod, what have you got in at number 13?
Well, unlucky for some, which might be a common thread here, but yeah, Yellow Submarine is 13 for me, because I won't waste too much time on it, but it was just a marketing ploy, really, rather than an album. You know, it was a movie. The movie's pretty good fun. You know, to be honest, if you want to watch the film, you know, it's good fun, and the animation and all the rest of it. But obviously, one side's a soundtrack, side two, and then side one is some songs which, you know, there's some good songs on it. Hey Bulldog's become a bit of a sort of a deep dive, you know, classic since, you know, in over time, hasn't it? It's a great song, and it's All Too Much, and I like it's only a northern song as well. So there's a few nice songs on it, but it's not really an album, not in the context of this show and on all of the other albums, and therefore, it's the weakest, just by volume, and, you know, amount of songs on it, and even the quality of the songs on it. So yeah, overall, that would be last place really for me.
So how many stars then?
What's 2.5 and 3? Remind me what the difference is.
Yeah, no problem.
Two and a half.
2.5's fair, 2's weak, 1.5's very poor.
What's 3?
3's good.
I'll go 2.5.
Right, okay, so it's fair, right? Fair.
Allowing it's a fair album because it's not really an album, so it can't be much better than that. Okay.
All right, that's fair answer, Rod. Jeremy, what have you got on at number 13?
Same. Yellow Submarine. I still enjoy the movie, but the album itself is a pretty unsatisfying listen, even though it has Hey Bulldog and It's All Too Much, two of my favorite Beatles songs. So I have to give it 2.5 stars, the same as Rod.
Yeah, that's fair enough, isn't it?
It is what it is.
Pete, what have you got?
Well, I'm not going to be controversial here. I'm going exactly the same, 2.5 stars, Yellow Submarine, number 13.
Yeah. Right.
I would add, though, the Yellow Submarine song track, which is a compilation which came out in the late 90s, is actually a fantastic CD, or like an album, totally made up. But it's all the music, all the little snippets of Beatles songs that appeared in the film, which didn't go on the original Yellow Submarine album. So songs like Eleanor Rigby, some of the stuff from Sgt. Pepper.
Yes.
Fantastic.
And that was their trial balloon for remastering and making stuff really CD friendly.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. Yeah. So that would have been, that version would have been top 5 for me.
Yeah, hot to disagree.
Yes, as it stands, the original one is number 13.
How many stars, Pete?
2.5, same as Gordon's for me.
Right, well, I'm controversial here because I've gone for Beatles for Sale at number 13. I think it's terrible. I really do. I mean, yeah, I love the artwork. Can I just say, I used to have that poster on my wall when I was at uni, so I actually loved the artwork, but I just think it's a terrible album. I like the song No Reply. I really catchy. But then there's just so many average songs. Obviously, 8 Days a Week is an absolutely perfect pop song, sheer brilliance. And I quite like Every Little Thing's quite dark, Total Lennon song. But after that, there's it's just full of cover versions. It's stuff that they must have done, you know, in Hamburg. It's you know, the Buddy Holly songs are awful. The Carl Perkins ones just seem a bit pointless to me. The other highlight is Follow the Sun, which I like. But I just don't think it's a very good album, and I've given it 2 stars. I just think that's it. That's my number 13 is Beatles for Sale. It would have been great if they'd had I Feel Fine and She's a Woman. Would have been a much better album because they recorded them at the time. But there you have it. So there's my number 13. Rod, what have you got at number 12?
Number 12, I've got With the Beatles.
Right.
12. To me, there's notwithstanding what you've just said about Beatles for Sale, there's not much between those two for me. I think they're quite kind of comparable. There's slightly less songs that grab me. There are obviously All My Loving's on it, which, you know, is obviously a well-known classic song. But both of those albums are packed with sort of almost half, or if not half, cover versions. So they're kind of half albums, I guess, because they didn't have enough material. But because just because of the song for song, I think the other one's a little bit stronger. So with the Beatles, I've got a 12.
It was also the era of 2 albums a year as well, which you can't get your head around, can you? It just seems incredible, doesn't it?
Not when Radiohead are your favourite band, no.
I mean, imagine this, I think being a Kate Bush fan or Peter Gabriel, we'll release one in another 2 decades. Well, there we go. Jeremy, what have you got at number 12?
At number 12, I have Beatles for Sale. And not because I think it's a terrible album. I think it's actually a quite good album. It has many, I mean, the No Reply, I'm a Loser, Babies in Black. There's a rare opening trio that is as good as that on any album. And I also love the way they were combining acoustic and electric instruments in a way that presaged Rubber Soul, I would say. I give it 3.5 stars. And the thing that really sinks it is Mr. Moonlight. For me, other than that, it would be a perfect album. Mr. Moonlight is just not a very good song to begin with. And even though Lennon gives a committed vocal, when they bring that organ in, it just makes me cringe every time. And it has since I was, 8 years old or whatever. And when you think about the fact that they had worked on for the BBC, Leave My Kitten Alone, great Little Willie John song.
Great song, yeah.
Which Lennon just blew out. Or there was that Anne Margaret song, You Just Don't Understand, which is also a great song. Both much darker, would have fit right in with No Reply, I'm a Loser, Babies in Black, which is, pretty emo for the 60s, that lineup right there. And so I just think that was a huge missed opportunity. They had done those covers on the BBC. They could have just put that on there. It would have been brilliant to have them with a full studio recording. Anyway, so yeah, Beatles for Sale. And you're right, it is a beautiful package. It's got the center pull, gatefold. I love my import copy of that, but we'll give it 3.5 stars.
Excellent.
They're working their way through the tiring grind of the early years of Beatlemania.
Interesting. Pete, what have you got at number 12?
I didn't do a rank, sorry, did I? I don't think.
Sorry, what would you give it, Rod?
Probably 3.
Right, okay.
With the Beatles, 3.
Yeah, which is good. Right, Pete. Sorry, Rod.
My number 12, like Jeremy, is Beatles for Sale. I would give it 3 stars. It is better than Yellow Submarine, but of the real Beatles albums, I think it is the weakest. It's got some great stuff on there, as has already been said, like 8 Days a Week, No Reply, I'm a Loser, and Leave My Kitten Alone should have totally been on there.
Right?
The 2 weakest
just
songs
been amazing?
Elvis Costello did a great cover version of it as well.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's brilliant. You want to go and listen to it, it's superb.
John Lennon's version is just fantastic. I just can't believe they didn't release that. And they put Mr. Moonlight on there. And also, my Beatles low point is actually Honey Don't. I cannot stand that. It's awful. So I think it would have been a totally different kettle of fish if you'd took off Mr. Moonlight, Honey Don't, and put on maybe I Feel Fine and Leave My Kitten Alone.
Yeah.
Then you're talking a good album.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree on that front, actually.
As you said earlier about 1963, like the 2 albums a year, they'd done a world tour, basically. They'd done a UK tour, Europe, Far East, America, done a film. They did 2 albums. I think they released sort of 4 singles or something and an EP of new songs. I think they were just a bit knackered by the time it came to... We're recording it on days off the UK tour. So they get a day off and would have to go and do like 6 songs in Abbey Road.
Brilliant.
So yes, it's, to be fair to them, they must have been shattered, so it shows, basically. It shows.
Yeah, I think so. Bearing in mind some of the songs they could have put on the albums. Yeah, my number 12 is Yellow Submarine. You've said all the main things. Bulldog is just absolutely fantastic. It's one of my favorite Beatles songs, actually. All Too Much, good. I absolutely really love All Together Now. I know it's a kids type song, but I absolutely love it, and it's really catchy. The side tune's actually not bad at all. I know it's just classical music by George Martin inspired, but I like it. And I've actually given it 3 stars. I quite like the album. So there we have it. There's part of my early controversial viewpoint. It's not the worst. So there we go. We're into number 11 now, Rod. What have you got in at 11?
11, I've got Beatles for Sale. Like I said, there wasn't much between that and With the Beatles. there's 8 days a week and No Reply. I like a lot, both of those tracks. And I think just based on those 2 tracks, it beats the other album. Just deserves it on those 2 tracks, I think. And like Pete said, they were 2 albums a year thing. They were just so busy. They were rushed into bringing another album out, which obviously that has made it suffer, and it could have been better. And I should have known better, possibly. But anyway, I just think that it's a bit of a neck and neck, and like I say, I'm so fond of 8 days a week and No Reply that I think sounds like a trivial reason, but that's the reason I put it above the other one, because I like those 2 songs so much.
Yeah, I mean, 63 is crazy. I mean, they wrote "She Loves You" in 63 as well, didn't they?
I know.
In Newcastle. In Newcastle, they wrote it on
August 63, like bang between "Please Please Me" and
that building in Newcastle should have a blue plaque for it. It's an absolute disgrace that it doesn't. Yeah, there you have it.
I'll give it a 3 as well, the same as the other one, because they're neck and neck. So yeah, a 3 for me. So good album, but no more than that, really.
Right. Okay, Jeremy, what have you got in at number 11?
Number 11, I have Magical Mystery Tour. It's one of those albums that it's so great how colorful, but it feels a little overstuffed. And I always felt like unlike Sgt. Pepper's, they got a little ahead of the production there. They just put too much in, and some things sound a little creaky. I don't know how else to describe it, but the songs are all amazing. And also the fact, I am being a little bit of a purist here and saying, I know it's pieced together. Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane is one of the great singles of all time, and maybe it should have remained that way. But then again, it's great to have it on an album, and I love a lot of the tracks on here. It really is a delightful listen in so many ways, but there's something about it that just feels a little bit overstuffed, a little exhausted, a little bit pleased with itself, that I think maybe that's why I still give it 4 stars. There's going to be a lot of 4-star albums here, right? It had to come in at number 11.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Okay, I suspect we're going to be all over the place on that album. Pete, what have you got next?
Number 11, I've got Help. It's got some fantastic tunes on. Obviously, the 2 singles, which is something we've not really touched on yet, is that whether they put the singles on or whether they left them off. In this case, they put the 2 big singles, Help and Ticket to Ride, on there. Fantastic songs. And then some of the film songs, like You're Gonna Lose That Girl and You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. I enjoy the film. Some people don't rate the film at all. I think it's a great fun film, like a spoof Bond movie sort of thing. I do enjoy the film, but there are some weak songs on there. Again, sorry Ringo, but Act Naturally isn't a great tune. And John Lennon's choice to put Dizzy Miss Lizzy on there, I just think it's a very, very weak
bonkers, isn't it?
He obviously loves the song because when they toured the States, it was in the set list. But for me, it's totally should have done something else.
To go from Yesterday to then Dizzy Miss Lizzy makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Well, Yesterday would have just been a perfect close, would it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How many stars have you given it, Pete?
I'll give it 3 stars.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Good choice. I've gone for 11. I've gone with Please Please Me, recorded on the 11th of September, or as the Americans call it, 9/11. And in a day, it's amazing, isn't it? When you think about it, the whole album recorded in a day. You hear of all these bands who did that sort of thing in those days. There's some great songs in it. Obviously, I Saw a Star in There. It's just brilliant. And Please Please Me is fantastic. I love Ringo's cover of Boys. I think it's great. Ask Me Why is terrific. There's a Place is great. Of course, Twist and Shout is fantastic. I have to say, I truly hate Love Me Do as a song. It's just garbage in my opinion, but that's another issue. It's not for me. I'm not Andy White's on this as well, isn't he? He's on at least 2 songs. Because they got the session guy, and he's on 3 songs altogether from what I know. I think maybe on another album. But again, I can't give it more marks because there's just so many covers on it. It's a great album. It is a fantastic debut album. When you hear it, you can't not smile when you put the album on because it's just full of really uplifting tunes. I've gone with 3 stars at this point, though. It's a good album. It's a good album. I think it's no more than that. It's a good album. And I do really like it. So what have you got at number 10, Rod?
Yeah, 10, I've got Please Please Me. Echoing what you've said. It is a good album, but I'd give it probably 3.5 just because it's a debut album. I think for a debut album, it's still an impressive debut for 1963 or early 1963. You know, it's got like, well, you don't like Love Me Do, but it has got 4 hit singles on it, hasn't it? You know, it opens with I Saw Her Standing There, great opening track that is. It's got 4 hit singles on it, and probably, well, certainly one of their best covers in terms of vocal performance. I mean, if you think, again, context-wise, if you listen to Twist and Shout and you imagine hearing that in 63, that was probably pretty visceral for 63. You know, and I just think as a cover, it's outstanding. And the production compared to with the Beatles and Beatles for Sale, I've got a reasonably early copy, not the black and gold one, unfortunately, but I've got a reasonably early copy. And it bounces out your speakers. It's so energetic and it's sort of vital, is it? You know, and fresh sort of thing. And
it is the definitive version as well, isn't it? Of Twist and Shout. Was it the screen? Was it the something Blue Jeans? I forgot what they're called now.
Yeah, Swinging Blue Jeans, maybe.
Yeah, that's it. But the Beatles is the version, isn't it?
Well, yeah, just because
the brothers did it first.
Well, because I guess because it transcended the original. Like I say, I think it's just a really, really, you know, powerful, good cover with fantastic vocals. And although that was before the other 2 albums, if you like, this is it's a much better album than the other 2. That did they all come out in 63, or was one 64?
Please Please Me and With the Beatles were 63.
Yeah, and Beatles for Sale 64.
64, yeah.
Yeah, but Please Please Me album that came out first, didn't it?
Yeah.
Chronologically, it's better than the 2 that followed it. Just the production, like I said, there's an energy into it. And
Hard Day's Night is the 3rd album.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, Hard Day's Night's the 3rd album. We'll go back to that. But anyway, yeah,
we'll be hearing about
there is an energy to it, and for a debut, I think it is an impressive debut. So I'd give it 3.5.
Yeah,
stars. The extra half a star because it's a debut album.
I think that's fair enough. I was almost at that point myself, and Lennon couldn't speak for about 3 days after he did. Apparently,
I'm not surprised.
Jeremy, what have you got at number 10?
At number 10, I have Help. Obviously, it's a fantastic album, but it's just a little too slick. I consider it it's the tipping point from Beatlemania Beatles into mid-Beatles. So you can hear them striving for something new on songs like You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. Just absolutely fantastic song, unique song. But then they have things like Another Girl, I Need You, The Night Before. You know, those are just, they're slick 60s pop. And they do not necessarily transcend the era the way you want the Beatles to do so. They're still better than, I would argue, than a lot of things that were going on back then, obviously. And there's so many good songs on there, but, you know, I still give it 4 stars, but I just find it, you know, it's just a bit on the slick side.
4 stars already. We're rocking here, aren't we? Pete, what have you got next in at 10?
Number 10 for me is Please Please Me. I would say it's a very good. I would say 3.5 stars for me. As Rod said, great debut album. If you look at, so I know there's 6 covers on there, 8 originals. 2 of the originals had been released as singles. But if you look at bands like the Kinks and the Stones, like their first albums were like virtually all cover versions. So to have like 8 original tunes on there was like, you know, totally different to what had gone before. Like definitely, the likes of Cliff and all that didn't write their own tunes. So they did pave the way for the other bands to start doing sort of self-penned material. Yeah, those 8 of the 14 songs were recorded in one 12-hour session. and John Lennon was full of cold.
Yeah.
So you can hear his bunged up nose. Like you listen to his vocals all the way through the album, you can just he sings like that anyway, but he's even more like that. So Twist and Shout was done in one take at the end of the day. And he couldn't, as you say, he just couldn't speak after that. So they had to go with that one take. Unfortunately, it was absolutely perfect. But great, like the energy, like from the 1, 2, 3, 4 into I Saw Her Standing There.
Yeah.
And then right at the very end, Paul McCartney gives it a woo at the end of Twist and Shout. I think the energy's just there all the way through. Some great covers. I love Baby It's You. And as you say, Boys is probably my favourite Ringo vocal. I just think it's fantastic. So it was. I think it showed the fact that like 8 of the songs were recorded in one day. They were a good live band at that point. Basically went in the studio, just recorded what they were playing in the cavern. They just recorded it live, and they were a tight band. Great harmonies, great vocals. So yeah, it's a very good 3.5 stars for me.
Yeah, interesting. Wow, good choice. Right, well, my number 10, controversially maybe, is Let It Be. The last album, as it were, released in 1970. There's some great songs on it. Obviously, Two of Us is fantastic. I absolutely love it. I like I'm in Mine. Let It Be, of course, is a great song. I Got a Feeling. I really love the sort of feel on it. And The Long and Winding Road is one of the great songs ever written, in my opinion. But there's some just average stuff on it. Some songs that are just pointless for me. Digger Pony's just some sort of sloppy jam. I couldn't quite see the point of that, really. And the production by Phil Spector, or Spector, is absolutely. I couldn't help myself. Is absolutely is absolutely terrible. I really hate that produced sound with all the strings on and all that sort of lush sort of thing that he tries to put on, and it's really quite sickening. Whereas when they re-released Let It Be Naked must be about 15, 20 years ago now, I absolutely loved it. I loved the production on it. I really enjoyed the whole feel. It was a much better album for me. It would be much higher up in my ratings. But yeah, I thought Spectre absolutely killed it. Oddly, on the deluxe edition that they've released, they put the Glyn Johns version, which is good, but it's still not as good as the Let It Be Naked version. I don't understand why they didn't add that to the final deluxe edition. It made no sense to me. There was a lost opportunity there. So I've given it 3 stars still. As I say, I love some of the songs too. It was just fantastic. But there we go. That's my number 10. Rod, what have you got at number 9?
Number 9's Magical Mystery Tour for a similar. It's a weird one because it's got Strawberry Fields is possibly my favourite Beatles song of all time, so that's on it. Love I Am the Walrus. It's got some individually fantastic songs, but for the same reasons that Jeremy had hit, fairly, even lower than me. It wasn't meant to be an album. I know it was in the US, but it doesn't feel like an album.
Yeah.
It just feels like they've bolted on a load of singles for a market and just sort of like morphed an EP into an album. And it doesn't really feel like an album. It wasn't recorded as an album. It wasn't meant to be an album. And I suppose I'm a bit of a purist as well. And it's kind of weird. It's individually the songs, there's 5-star songs on it.
Yeah.
But because I'm a purist and it's not an album and it's a sort of rehashed, morphed sort of EP /album / it's probably 3.5 for me because it doesn't feel like it belongs, with the others because it wasn't meant to be.
Okay, interesting. No, that's absolutely fine. That's interesting. Jeremy, what have you got at next?
I have With the Beatles next. It's a good follow-up to Please Please Me, but it's just doesn't have quite the freshness. When you think it's got George Harrison's first song that he recorded as a songwriter, Don't Bother Me, is just fantastic. And Money is just an amazing cover. You can just feel Lennon's working class background just fueling that incredible vocal performance. But it's a solid album all the way. Everything that's been said about it is true. I agree with it. I still give it 4 stars. but it's, you know, solidly in at number 9.
Interesting. Pete?
Number 9 for me, Let It Be. As has been said, there's some, you know, five-star songs on there, like Long and Winding Road, title song, I've Got a Feeling, Two of Us, but there is filler on there, and the production does totally let it down. I think on Let It Be Naked they included Don't Let Me Down as well, which was a surprise that they didn't put it on the actual Let It Be album.
One of the greatest songs of all time.
Yeah,
great song.
So yes, Let It Be Naked would have been higher up the list, but as it stands, the UK Let It Be version is number 9 for me, and I'll give it 3.5 stars. Another very good for me.
Yeah, well, I've got to jump up in quality now because I've given With the Beatles 4 stars. I think I love it. I really love it. It's just one of those albums I've really enjoyed playing. Done over 7 sessions. It's got a real vibrant feel. It Won't Be Long is one of my favorites. Is one of my favorite Beatles songs. It reminds me of Buzzcocks. It's just like a classic proto pop punk type song. It's great. All My Loving is. There's so many times I've got the words perfect pop written next to it, and that's one of them. I Want to Be Your Man is great, although probably better known by the Stones when they gave it away. What I really must mention is my sheer love of the percussion on this album. Ringo's percussion playing is brilliant. His use of the tambourine is magnificent. Clearly massively influenced by Tamla Motown. Obviously, the covers tell you that as well. Money is, as we said earlier on, is fantastic. But I love Mr. Postman. It reminds me of when I first got them through the cartoons, and I remember that being one of the songs. Thinking, oh, this is a great song. I'd never heard the original at the time, and it's a great cover version. It really is the Marvelettes song. So I've given it 4 stars. I absolutely love this album. It's just an album you can't play and go, oh, just beautiful bounce around type songs. Great album. So we're up to number 8 now. Rod, what have you got at number 8?
Yeah, I've got Let It Be at 8. Similar reasons that it's can't be higher. Production, Phil Spector's sort of schmaltzy, you know, saccharine-soaked strings just do your head in on certain songs. I mean, Long and Winding Road is, like you say, it's a fantastic song, and he's done his absolute best to murder it. I think, you know, if you listen to the strings on those, they're not necessary. You know, if that was just a sort of a bare sort of pyramid song style piano thing, you know, or whatever, you know, and just let the song sing for itself. He brings all this stuff in. You just think, oh, for God's sake, it's awful. And almost can't ruin it because it is a good song. It's still a great song, but yeah, the production.
What's interesting is when you see McCartney live, he actually does that version. He puts all the strings and stuff on, which is
maybe he
because he's the one who slaughtered it.
Yeah, there is a famous letter that he wrote to EMI saying, take off the choir, because there's a horrible like vocal choir on there. He said, take that off completely, reduce the strings so they're like much quieter. So I think he does keep the strings, but he doesn't do all the like all the choirs and stuff. And there at the bottom of the letter, and he says like point C, don't do it again. Not that he gave them a chance because he left the band, but
and it's very hit and miss. Let It Be. It's got Long and Winding Road. It's got Let It Be. It's got I've Got a Feeling. It should have had Don't Let Me Down on it. I've got no idea. If you watch the Get Back documentary, which I've watched, and it features more than any other song because it's a great song, and then it's not on the album. You think, well, and it's the same session as Abbey Road, isn't it? I think pretty much.
They just finish and go in. There's a very short gap. There's a book I read where it details every song that they've done. It's a great book, actually.
Similar time? Is it a similar time?
Yeah.
Very, very close.
That was all one big.
If you imagine you combine the best songs of those two together. I'm not saying they would necessarily go together because it's not an album, but what I mean is that the hit and miss aspects, if you just took the very best things of both albums, it'd be like stellar, wouldn't it? I think.
Yeah,
you know. And I just think, so the production is a bit rubbish, a bit hit and miss, and it sort of sounds a bit like the last album somehow. And maybe, you know, Dig a Pony and some of the sounds like they're I mean, the Roof concert, they're having good fun, but it sounds like they're mucking about a little bit as well, sort of.
Yeah.
To a degree. And he'd already brought Ram out, hadn't he? Had he already released Ram?
No, it
McCartney,
was
the
his,
solo
it was
album.
his, it was his
Yeah, so
first solo
that was
album.
all. That was already occurring,
so.
that solo stuff. So it's got a little bit of a feel of that as well, I think. So that's why it's a little bit low down. It's still got some great stuff on it, but yeah, I'd give it 3.5. It's a very good album for the good stuff that's on it. So yeah, that's my 8.
Right, interesting and good. Yeah, fair choice. Jeremy, what have you got next?
My number 8 is also Let It Be for many of the same reasons. This one was a hard one though, because it is so compromised in so many ways. I mean, the Phil Spector stuff, they handed him a bunch of tapes and said, do something, so I almost don't blame him. He just had to try to do something to make it into an album. And you can complain about some of the things he did, even some of the sequencing, but the thing that makes it this high for me is the emotional part of it. And one thing I've always talked about is the Beatles to me represented a dream of human unity. 4 people completely working together as one. Such a rare thing in the world. Everybody's always pulling in their own directions, got their own agenda. For a while there, from 1963 to 1969 at least, they worked as one. And when you hear something like Two of Us and just that harmonizing, it just grabs my heart. So I could not rank it any lower than this, but it does have a lot of those problems that you mentioned. One song nobody has mentioned, I don't think, is Get Back, which ends the album. I mean, what a great song. It's one of their best rock songs.
Yeah.
I love that song. And, watching the documentary and seeing.
Yeah, that was fascinating.
Go into an altered state to pull that song out of nowhere when everybody was at their lowest ebb creatively. And I think Lennon wasn't even in the studio at the time.
Yeah, it was originally going to be like a protest song against Enoch Powell, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think Long and Winding Road, it's interesting because I agree that the spectrization is too heavy, but I think the naked version is too naked. There needs to be a middle ground. Maybe it is that live version that McCartney's been doing, except his voice is pretty shot these days. Anyhow, so that's my number 8. I still give it 4 stars, thanks to that emotional importance to me personally.
No, that's fair dues. Pete, what have you got next?
Number 8, I've got With the Beatles, and this is the first of my 4-star albums. I think it is a great album. I've enjoyed this album since I was a kid. I love the cover. I think that it's totally different to what was going on. I think that like the cover of Please Please Me is typical early 60s album art, but with the Beatles, I think something totally different. It is quite moody with a sort of half shadow, half light. 8 originals on there out of the 14 songs. The covers are some of the best covers they ever did. Money is like heavy metal to me. I just think it is the birth of heavy metal, that song. I love like Please Mr. Postman, as you said, Roll Over Beethoven, great Chuck Berry song. I even like Till There Was You, the sort of McCartney doing the show tunes. I love the acoustic guitars on that, lovely guitar solo. And some of the originals, like All My Lovin', should have been a single, could easily have been a single. All I've Got to Do. Songs I don't like, I Want to Be Your Man. The Stones did it way better. And one of the rare Paul McCartney clunkers is Hold Me Tight. I think it's very poor, that song. He sounds flat. It's just a flat song altogether. But so yes, they could have put I Want to Hold Your Hand and This Boy on there. Got rid of them too. Again, you're bumping the album up way up the charts. But they didn't want to rip the fans off. They didn't want to put all the singles on the album, so they released them separately. And it was Capitol in America that decided to repackage them and rip the fans off a bit by only giving them like 11 songs per album. So this is where the butchering thing comes in, I think.
Yeah.
11 songs per album. They were putting all the singles and B-sides and just creating albums out of thin air, which didn't exist. Like With the Beatles became Meet the Beatles, I think, in the States, and it had I Want to Hold Your Hand and I Saw Her Standing There was left over, and but yeah, it's a 4-star album for me, With the Beatles. I really like it. Yes,
great choice. It is a great album in my opinion. My number 8 is Help. I've just written here, what a jump in quality from Beatles for Sale. It is a two-sider though. because side two is definitely weaker. Side one, obviously the title track is unbelievable. What a great song that is. You've got to hide your love's fantastic. Got here great songs. Is it about an affair? Is it about gay relationship? Who knows? I need you. I just want to comment here about George's sort of clear influence on the Byrds. You can clearly hear it in his guitar, his 12-string Rickenbacker. It's a massive influence on the Byrds and all that sort of East Coast, West Coast, whatever. American rock, like West Coast, I think that comes
West
in.
Coast, yeah.
West Coast, sorry. That clearly comes in. Ticket a Ride has got one of the best drum beats that I've ever heard, in my opinion. I love the way Ringo just holds back and creates this beautiful feel. It's brilliant. John's vocals are sublime. Naturally, those terrible. It's just Dizzy Miss Lizzy was mentioned, and again yesterday. You know, it's there's a reason why it's one of the most played songs of all time. And just a quick shout out for I've Just Seen a Face, which is clearly influenced by Simon and Garfunkel. In my opinion, it's a great song. That's an absolutely great song. Never gets
kind of
mentioned.
early folk rock kind of thing.
Yeah, really, never gets
You know what
mentioned.
song I just wanted to jump in on that I didn't mention when we were talking about this was Tell Me What You See is an odd favorite of mine. I love the keyboards on that song and the drum beat, just the way it all works together so nicely. Anyway.
Yeah.
Quite Dylan
song.
influenced that song as well, isn't it? It's got like a Dylan feel to it. But yeah, I'm still at 4 stars, but Help, terrific album. So what have we got at number 7 then, Rod?
Number 7 is A Hard Day's Night. I've got a 7. I mean, it was their third album, so it actually came before Beatles for sales. It was such a leap forward. I've put from Please Please Me and With the Beatles, and it's their first full album without any covers on it. So it's impressive in that sense, because obviously they've gone from having pretty much half an album of covers to no covers and all their own material, which obviously was that sort of endorsed that they were genuine, you know, songwriters, composers, you know, kind of very talented, not just another band, I suppose. And there's some, I've just got the first side, it's like one after the other, isn't it? Of just absolute kind of bangers, really, and just chugs along, doesn't it? The second side's it's a bit, I think the second side's not as strong as the first side, but it is quite a consistent album. But I just think that it's a little bit samey. You know, obviously it's got Can't Buy Me Love and Hard Day's Night, but it's very poppy, but exclusively so. Fantastically so, but exclusively so. So it just lacks a bit of variety, that's why it's below Help, for example, which I haven't put yet. But anyway, that's the reason why I've put Hard Day's Night below Help, for example, because although it's arguably got more well-known songs on it, it's still 163, 166, and to me, you can tell the difference. So I'd give it 4 stars. Hard Day's Night, 7 for me.
Okay, Jeremy, what have you got at number 7?
Number 7 for me is the debut, Please Please Me. It just bursts out of the speakers, as Rod said, in any form, I think. I still haven't heard the mono version of it, though, I have to admit. I'd like to hear that. But when you think about 1963, put it in context, rock and roll really was not happening on an album length release at that time. There was very little competition. And so they established something great. And I think their covers are very well chosen. They weren't just picking things that would make song publishers rich. They really liked the songs that they were covering. And I think that makes a big difference. And a song like There's a Place just shows so much depth for that time. To me, that always showed John Lennon getting in touch with his, you know, introspective side. It's still in a very pop format. I just love that album. I think it's fantastic. So I give it 4.5 stars. One of the great debut albums of all time. Please Please Me.
Pete?
My number 7 is Magical Mystery Tour. obviously with the singles going on the sort of what was side 2 of the vinyl, Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields. What can you say about them 2 songs? Absolutely incredible works. But for the EP songs, which were on the UK EP, I Am the Walrus. What an amazing song. I absolutely love that song. Got no idea what it's about. People have tried to pick it apart. I think that's why Lennon wrote it, just because he knew people would try and pick it apart. And then he says on the later album, The Walrus was Paul, just to confuse people even more. I absolutely love I Am the Walrus. Fantastic song. I love Fool on the Hill as well. I think that's a great tune. Flying and Blue Jay Way. But I think that one gets lost in the fog a bit, Blue Jay Way, as the lyrics say. But yes, it is a 4-star album for me. The US version, it's anything with Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane on there, like Hello Goodbye is a great song. I love Baby You're a Rich Man as well. What a fantastic tune
great
that is.
song.
Just to be stuck on a B-side. So yes, 4 stars for Magical Mystery Tour for me.
Right, well, good choice, because my number 7 is Magical Mystery as well. It would have been higher if it were a proper album, but it's not. But I'm going to officially declare I'm in 5-star territory now. I'm openly saying so, because there are so many great songs on this album. In fact, there are better songs on this album than a couple of albums that follow later, track for track. But because this isn't a proper album, I seriously couldn't actually have it higher. I just thought it felt wrong. And also, it doesn't coherently go as well as some of the albums that fit later on. And some of the other albums that fit later on have got slightly weaker tracks, but it works as an album, if that makes any sense. Title track's brilliant. I absolutely love it. It's just great. Fool on the Hill, Brill, Flying, yeah, not bad. All right. Blue Jay Way, great. Your Mother Should Know is just fantastic. It's like a Kinks song. So, classic music hall sort of feel to it. I really, really like it. I mean, obviously, you've mentioned that some really great songs. I Am the Walrus, and Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields that should have arguably been on Sergeant Pepper's, or not on, or on this. Baby a Rich Man's great. All You Need to Love. It's a song that's, for me, it's actually almost, I don't see the point of it being on in a funny sort of way, but there you have it. The production's great. I love it. Just works really well. I think Ken Scott does quite a bit of this as well. Yeah, just Hello Goodbye, just brilliant. Absolutely top songs on this. So yeah, 5 stars for me. So there we go. Rod, what have you got at number 6?
Number 6, which I alluded to a minute ago, I think I've got Help at 6, because I think it sounds a bit more mature from the earlier poppier stuff. I'm not saying it's not poppy, but just the subject matter, Help, obviously, it's a well-known thing. It was kind of like a genuine kind of cry for help at the time by John Lennon, because of everything that had gone on in 3 mad years prior to that sort of thing. And it's just a fantastic sort of condensed yelp, of supreme music, really. Help as a track. It's one of my favourite songs, probably, of theirs. It'd definitely be a top 10, maybe, song of the Beatles, Help. And then to have Yesterday on the same album, which again is, well, they're both iconic songs, aren't they? But I just feel that, it just feels like it's Ticket to Ride on that album as well, isn't it? Yeah, you mentioned earlier, drumming. It was a fantastic song as well. And it just sounds slightly more. And I think that someone mentioned Dylan earlier, like You Got Hide Your Love With. I think there was some mutual respect around that time, wasn't there, between both of them? Like Beatles admired him rather than vice versa. He admired the Beatles, certainly, because they were using hybrid chords, and they were having just number one after number one. And he I think he was quoted at the time as saying that they're doing things that other people aren't doing, and they're great, and then they thought he was great because he is, lyrically, especially, and that sounds be a worthy. You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, be a worthy Dylan song, really. I think I don't think Dylan would be miffed if he sort of wrote that and released it, and I think the songs on Help that just wouldn't have appeared on any of the albums prior to Help, and that's why it's a little bit higher for me. So and I'd give it 4 stars. which is that very good?
It's excellent.
Yeah, 4 stars. Yeah, a 4-star album. So I think same as Hard Day's Night in terms of ranking, but for the reasons I've said, I put it above A Hard Day's Night.
Yep, oh, that's fair enough.
Maturity and variety, probably.
Yeah, good, great choice. Jeremy, what have you got next?
I have Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. A wonderful album in every regard. It's hard to pick apart what sometimes bothers me about it. I mostly just love it. Sometimes I think She's Leaving Home is a bit smug, a bit self-satisfied. Sometimes When I'm 64, same, the granny music, as John Lennon called it. I think it's hilarious that people still make fun of Within You Without You. I saw a recent list of the Beatles' worst songs, and they had that one on there.
Oh,
And I I remember being in middle school, people would make fun of it. Oh, he's so mystical, but I actually think it's great. It just sets a mood, and you also get some of John Lennon's most amazing stuff. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Benefit of Mr. Kite, I love. Good Morning is just fantastic. And of course, A Day in the Life is a true work of art, a masterpiece of Western culture. I mean, you can just ladle on all the superlatives on A Day in the Life and just load it up. It will withstand any praise you give it. It's just so fantastic. The things they were doing on that album, just nobody had done before, from the packaging. And you can see behind me, I have the picture disc version of it. My parents thought that would be amusing. And there's a little note on the back that says, this may sound worse than a regular record. But I mean, I grew up listening to the stereo version they bought in 1967, and it's just fantastic. What a great record. What a statement. I love it. I give
how
it
many
4.5
stars?
stars.
4.5. Yeah, right. Great choice. Great choice. Pete?
Number 6, I'm going for A Hard Day's Night. A Hard Day's Rut, I think the Ruttles called it.
Yes.
Yeah, Ron Nasty. So yes, like all original Lennon McCartney songs. So even the songs that the song that George sings is a Lennon and McCartney tune, which John thought was beneath him, I think. So he gave it to George to sing. But yeah, title song, Can't Buy Me Love, I'll Be Back. I absolutely love that song, like, which is the last song on the album. Anytime at All as well, I think is a fantastic tune.
Great song.
It's got some of the like from the first couple of years, it's got some of the best songwriting, I think, from like the 63, 64 period. You Can't Do That, Should Have Known Better, and then the 2 ballads like If I Fail and I Love Her. Lovely songs. The ones I'm not so keen on are like When I Get Home, I'll Cry Instead. And I've never really liked Tell Me Why. It's it just drags for me. But so yes, I think changing a couple of the tunes there, it would have been a 5-star, but for me it's a 4.5. I'll call it a classic rather than a masterpiece. But yeah, that's my number 6.
Yeah, well, my number 6 is also A Hard Day's Night, and as you know, I'm already in the 5-star territory. Yeah, I agree. You could have probably got I Want to Hold Your Hand on or something, couldn't you? But yeah, you've said everything I really want to say there. There's a couple of things like, yeah, I think the George one, it's sort of almost epitomizes the Merseybeat sound, isn't it? It's probably one of the last times that they'll actually have that sound. But there are some really great songs on. Like I love it's very sophisticated sounding for its time, and I mean the exuberance of "I Can't Buy Me Love" is just unbelievable. It swings so much. It's fantastic. It's impossible not to tap your toes to that. If you don't, you're dead. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Um, uh, yeah, I love it. There's not a song on it that I don't really like. I love the whole thing. You Can't Do That's like got a real funk groove. What I will point out though is sometimes Lennon's rather dodgy, sort of misogynist type lyrics. You're thinking, wow, not sure you get away with that these days. Pardon the pun, but yeah, it's a 5-star album. I absolutely love the album. I think it's great. So
that 12-string Rickenbacker that just goes all the way through the album. Like you mentioned the Birds earlier. I think Roger McGuinn said that you went to see Hard Day's Night in the cinema and just heard the opening chord, that jang. It's like, I want one of those guitars.
Well, there you go, isn't it? It's definitely the case. Right, we're into the big 5 now then, Rod. Where have you got number 5?
Top 5, yeah. Yeah, number 5 I've got might be a little bit controversial because people have it at number 1, but anyway, my 5's Abbey Road. I mean, Abbey Road's, from the iconic cover art to, their most streamed song ever, isn't it? And Here Comes the Sun, I think, first track on side 2. But the first side, it starts with Come Together and Something, and you think, what? The other top tier, beyond top tier, really. Certainly Something's without a doubt, in my top 10 songs. Frank Sinatra famously called it the best love song ever written. I wouldn't argue with it. It's certainly in the...
By Lennon and McCartney, didn't he? That's what he said instead of George.
Yeah. I know, yeah. Oops a daisy. But yeah, I just think, but then it goes, it troubles me, Abbey Road, because, I mean, this is my own personal opinion, but so it goes from goes from Come Together with a fuzzy bass and just a fantastic intro, then Something, which is sublime, to Maxwell's Silver Hammer's the next track, which I hate, just because I think I hate it because of the contrast following those 2 tracks. I'm like, what's even going on? What's that doing there? It just does my head in. And then after that, you've got I Want You, She's So Heavy, which is fantastic. I love I Want You.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the stuff, it's sort of, I don't know. I know that, and then the second side starts with Here Comes the Sun. Again, you can't say anything else about Here Comes the Sun, really, apart from, I suppose I would add that, Lennon and McCartney, most famous songwriters on earth, yet Something and Here Comes the Sun are possibly certainly 2 of the best Beatles songs ever written, and Harrison wrote both of them. So anyway, I had to squeeze that in. But then that medley that people go on about, again, it's sort of great, but it's really hit and miss. Like, there's bits like Golden Slumbers I love, but your Polythene Pan, Me, Mr. Mustard, and they don't do a great deal for me. And the end's just silly a bit, and I don't know, it's eclectic, but the things that work are just up there, and the things that don't are just, I don't enjoy listening to them at all. But saying that, because of how good the good bits are, it's a 4.5-star album all day long.
Okay.
It's tons better than any band or most bands would probably ever release. The good stuff on it is just, right up there. But yeah, the problematic is there's problems with it all over the shop for me, especially Maxwell's Silver Hammer. I'm not having it. Anyway, that's I give it a 4.5 overall.
Right. Jerry, what have you got next?
My number 5 is the Beatles, otherwise known as the White Album. It's what a sprawling masterpiece it is. And there's so many good songs on it, it would take up the rest of the show just to talk about them. But I will mention how much I love Glass Onion, those angular strings. While My Guitar Gently Weeps, another George Harrison incredible song. Happiness Is a Warm Gun, complex, weird, hard rockin'. I also love I Will and Julia. What a beautiful double showing their ballad mastery. Your Blues is just incredible. Birthday, Mother Nature's Son. Everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey. I absolutely love just from the guitar sound to the energy, just the crazy energy of it. Helter Skelter kicks ass. Long, Long, Long is one of those songs that for decades never even sounded like a song to me. But after listening to Fleet Foxes and Bon Iver and then going back to it, it coalesced. And I realized he sort of invented freak folk. George Harrison, he just a genius, maybe a little, under-recognized at the time, but he really was an unbelievable songwriter. And side 4 is just incredible. Savoy Truffle, another George Harrison song.
Great
Cry
song.
Baby Cry is chilling. Revolution Number 9 also is one of those things that just seemed like a big sloppy mess. But when you think that it only goes on for 8 minutes, that's not even that long. And then hearing a classical arrangement of it where they tied every sound to an acoustic instrument and vocalists and stuff like that, I actually realized it is a composition. It's a piece of music. Is it even a song? It's a Beatles song because they said it's a Beatles song, and it's on a Beatles album. So I actually think it's absolutely incredible. Great album. I give it 4.5 stars. You know, the main problems with it are things like Piggies. It's okay. Rocky Raccoon starts out very nice, almost like a folk song. And then he goes into this bizarre nasal voice and just tanks the whole thing. I don't know
I love
why
it. There you go. Go on.
they did that. Don't Pass Me By. I kind of like, but the violin on that, the fiddle is a little annoying. Bungalow Bill is only okay. Wild Honey Pie is 50 seconds of lunacy. So there are little bits on there where I can get a little bit what's impatient with the Beatles and their process. But you have to look at it as a whole. As Paul said, it's the Bloody Beatles White Album. And I think when you look at it that way, it is a true masterpiece. I still give it 4.5 stars just for those little bits that annoy me. But
Right.
that's my
Interesting. Pete?
Well, I'm now firmly into 5-star territory, so it was difficult. I found the top 5 difficult, but they're all 5-star albums for me. They are all masterpieces. So I've gone number 5, Abbey Road. Yeah, as Rod said, that the top songs are just up there. Like George, I think it was the peak of George's songwriting. Like Here Comes the Sun and Something. Just amazing tunes. I love the production of this whole album. I love the long medley on side 2, how it starts with "You Never Give Me Your Money," which is a little medley on its own. It seems to be like sort of 2 or 3 songs joined on just on its own, and then it goes off, and that one comes back in later on. I just love the whole idea of that. So yes, there's weak songs like Sorry Ringo Again, Octopus's Garden, but I do love the guitar work on Octopus's Garden. Maxwell probably would have worked on the White Album, but didn't really
Yes.
work.
They could have arguably put Come and Get It on, couldn't they, instead of Maxwell?
Like
I
All
think Come
Things
and
Must
Get It would have
Pass.
worked really, really well, actually, you know. Or All Things Must Pass, yeah, obviously.
Yeah. Some of the stuff that went on the first solo albums, some of the stuff went on McCartney. Or like Junk is a lovely little song that went on McCartney that he'd introduced earlier that year, but they'd just not done. All Things Must Pass, George tried to do during the Get Back sessions. But yeah, it is a masterpiece. So that's my number 5.
Right, well, my number 5 is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which I'm going to argue has some, at times, considerably bigger songs than The Magical Mystery, but there you have it. Some great songs, which you've already mentioned. The opening track, obviously, which I love the story of it just coming out and Hendrix actually performing it live as the opening song. I think that's great.
Yeah, 2 days after the album came out.
2 days later,
The
that's
Beatles
brilliant, isn't it?
the Beatles in the
so
audience.
cool.
And he
Yeah.
plays that.
That's fantastic, and Little Help is one of those songs where it's all right, but then you hear Joe Cocker's version and you think, right, okay, well, that just blows it out the water. Yeah, so some great songs on obviously Lucy, but there are some songs on it that for me are just like all right, and I don't think they'd get onto some of the other albums, but they work perfectly in with this. So Getting Better, Fixing a Whole Good Morning. To me, none of them are. I don't go, oh, I must listen to that now, but they work perfectly in the structure of this album. If that makes sense, you know, they just sort of roll really well, and you go, yep, excellent, excellent. But as separate songs to me, I certainly wouldn't put them on a mix, for example, on a like a Beatles mix. So yeah, lovely Rita, I really quite like. And again, it's a song that actually oddly could have actually fitted on to Abbey Road. It's one of those that would actually fit in quite nicely on sort of the medley bit.
Yeah.
That would have actually worked. I actually love She's Leaving Home, may I add. And I think it's maybe a British thing because it's got that Kathy Come Home thing, which we know about in terms of the documentary, in terms of homelessness and all the rest of it within Britain, the Ken Loach film. So it sort of hits home. It's one of those songs that are really well up, and I listened to it. I listened to it earlier on today, and it sort of brings tears to your eyes. It's such a beautiful song, and the lyrics about the mother and the father upset about the daughter going, it's beautiful. You've said everything else there. I love the whimsy of Paul McCartney, and I openly hold my hands up. To be able to write when you're 64 at 14 is incredible. And Within Without You is just great with the Asian music circle. Day in the Life, we've already mentioned, but it started with the death of Tara Brown, and then it goes with all those sort of odd things. Breathtaking. And again, if people haven't heard it as well, go and listen to Jeff Beck's version of it because it's absolutely magnificent on guitar. What a great version he does of it. So yeah, as we've already said, 5-star territory, Sergeant Pepper's. And I think from our generation, we find it's one of those where we don't appreciate how monumental it was. I suspect, whereas we might say, oh yeah, no, I mean the bollocks, it was a monumental album for maybe it's a later period of time we appreciate, but it was such a groundbreaking album. When you speak to older people, and they go, oh, that was the album. So there you go. Anyway, Rod, I digress. What have you got next?
Yeah, number 4, I've got my top 4 all 5-star albums. I think Abbey Road was 4.5, wasn't it? Yeah, so they're all 5-star albums. I've got Rubber Soul at 4, which was a big leap forward from Help, really. The whole different sound. I think is that when they first started introducing drugs, I think, was it? Around that time?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Well, they had smoked marijuana with marijuana. Here I am sounding like a police.
I don't know whether that
they had smoked pot with Dylan around Help.
Something like Nowhere Man is, was a favorite song of mine as well, but that's nothing like anything that on any previous album, really. Nowhere Man in my life. So it's got 2 absolute, classics. It opens with Drive My Car, I think, which is kind of they've got quite a few good openers, to be fair, haven't they? On albums. I mean, talk about Come Together, and I Saw Her Standing There, and again here they open with Drive My Car, which is pretty banging tune, but it's a little bit Norwegian Wood's a second track, which I really like, that acoustic, the acoustic side of them. That's a track I like, but conversely, Michelle and Girl don't do a great deal for me. They're just a bit meh to me. They're all right, but like I said, they don't really do a great deal. I mean, there's a couple of other really weak tracks. I can't remember the name of one of them, but it's got a country sort of picky feel to it. Do you know what track I'm on about? Anyone? Oh.
Yeah, I think you're probably talking about the one that Ringo sings. What Goes On?
What Goes On? It's awful. Anyway, there's an awful track that's got a country feel to it. I don't like them.
Yeah, that'll be that one.
What Goes On has a little bit of a country feel.
When they do a country bluesy country vibe, they do it on tracks here and there. I just find those tracks annoying. That's awful, that track. And the last, and for such a great album, it does tail off. Run for Your Life's a bit of a it was just a damp squib of a song compared to the rest of the album, in my opinion. But overall, it's still a 5-star album. It's just not as good as the other 3 that follow it.
Yeah, Run for Your Life's got those other dodgy type of Lennon lyrics again, isn't it? You're thinking,
but of the time,
time.
Yeah, get the tea on, lover, or give you a here, kind of thing. Yeah. I didn't just say that. What, my wife can't hear me from here.
Jerry, what you got next?
I have at number 4, A Hard Day's Night. It, to me, is the pinnacle of the early Beatles. All Lennon McCartney, all the time, end to end. Just absolutely incredible. One song I don't think was mentioned was Things We Said Today, which to me gets into this almost British folk territory with this kind of haunting melody, which just something that, for whatever reason, connects with me. Like Ricky, Don't Lose That Number, that kind of dark, haunting thing that just blows me away. I just absolutely love it. And the whole album, like you said, Can't Buy Me Love is just incredible. I'll Be Back is maybe a little bit of a weaker closing track, but other than that, it's just an incredible album, establishing Lennon and McCartney as the greatest songwriting duo of all time. They didn't need any help. They could just put them all together and make an album of just their songs. I give it 5 stars.
Yeah.
Early Beatles.
Yeah, class. Pete?
My number 4 is Sgt. Pepper. I love this album start to finish. It is an album I can play and then just go back to side 1 and play it again. I think it's the most complete album in terms of like the songwriting, the production, the packaging. As you've I can't remember who said it earlier, but it works as a thing. And if you try and take some of the songs out, they don't stand up so well on their own. They're still great songs, but when you listen to it start to finish,
Yeah.
you can't stop listening to it. It is just a thing that works start to finish, and like the crowd noise at the start, and then to get to A Day in the Life at the end. And my vinyl player, I've got an old 70s vinyl player, record player, and it doesn't take the needle off the record. So when you get to the I never do see any at the end, I can sit and listen to that all night. It does just go round and round. Yes, I do think it's the most like consistently good. I don't think there's a bad song on it. Even Ringo, yes, Ringo, yes. I think even With a Little Help from My Friends is a great song. I love Within You Without You. Yes, definite 5-star. It's my number 4, but masterpiece.
Yeah, it definitely is. And the new remix, remaster, whatever you want to call it, a bit of both, is brilliant as well. They've done such a good job on the remasters recently. I have to say they're really excellent with regards to that. Right, my number 4 is as has also already been mentioned. There's Rubber Soul. We said everything I really want to say. It's just great. A few little comments that I'll add in with regards to just the slightly. I think you're seeing there's the step up in terms of the different sounds, because like you've got George doing a sitar on Norwegian Wood, which is obviously very different for its time. And then you've got the clear James Brown influence on the word, which is brilliant. It's really funky. It's got a proper, real good funk groove. I really, what else have I got here? Again, another mention of the Birds there if I needed someone. And then, Run for Your Life, again, another great song. I actually really love Michelle, but they have it. Girl, less so. But I love Michelle. It is just one of them albums you put it on, and like as Pete said, you could listen to it again. I think it's almost like the acoustic album, isn't it? And it's a fantastic album for me. It really is a great album. I can't wait because I think that's the one that they're working on at the moment in terms of remixing and remastering it. So I'm really looking forward to hearing that one. So yeah, my number 4 there, Rubber Soul, absolute masterpiece. Right, we're down to the big 3. Rod, what have you got at number 3?
Yeah, number 3's Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I think has everyone already had that? Anyway,
yeah,
a lot's been said about it already. And you can just repeat, the iconic sort of groundbreaking techniques, cover art, concept album, flow. Just the genius of it is probably undeniable. But there are songs on it I don't like so much. I really like She's Leaving Home as well, as it happens. I think it's like a really, I don't know, just a really excellent sort of dreamy tune. And is that a McCartney song or a Lennon song?
McCartney, yeah.
Yeah, it's very McCartney. Yeah, I thought it probably was McCartney song.
Yeah.
And I don't like Lovely Rita Meter Maid as a song. I mean, I know they do. I appreciate what Pete said. That there is a flow to the album, but there are some that, I like Benefit of Mr. Kite, but I don't like Lovely Rita Meter Maid, and I don't particularly like Fixing a Hole overly. They're a little bit.
It would have been interesting if they put Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane on, wouldn't it? Which they've obviously now done on the remix. I use like a lid, like
Strawberry Fields would have. I think
stream system, and it's on there. But yeah,
I mean, Penny Lane had the horns, and Strawberry Fields is quite Lucy in the Sky-ish in terms of sound. They may have worked. That would have made it stellar if they bunged a couple of the iffy ones off. Maybe.
Yeah.
And then Day in the Life. I mean, what can you say about that? Like Jeremy mentioned, it's just a masterpiece of a song, and although I think I prefer Lennon songs on the. So you prefer one or the other? That's not that I prefer one or the other, but if I did a list of songs, say top 20, I'd probably have more Lennon songs than McCartney songs. But then that song is the perfect example of them together, isn't it? Because it's the two of them.
Yeah, and Paul does the middle eight, doesn't he?
Yeah, so there's a Paul bit, there's a John bit, they just merge
Yeah,
almost in perfection on that track.
without a doubt.
It's like
It's like
the
we can work
pinnacle.
it out in a way.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
It takes it to a new
and
level.
it's a great closer, because on some of their other albums they have good openers, but some of their closers tail off, I think. But that's the best closer of all time, arguably, I think, really. So yeah, it was difficult to rank. They're all 5-star, the top 4, so they're a little bit interchangeable, I think. But obviously, for the purposes of this thing we're doing this evening, that's it. Landed at 3 just tonight as a 5-star. So that it's a dead heat, really. 4 5-star albums.
Yeah.
And just ranked with a fag paper between them, I suppose, really. And it's just personal preference. And there's a few tracks that, annoy me a little bit, that I'm not so keen on. But it's a fantastic, massively influential piece of work, isn't it? So yeah, it's a 5-star album, number 3.
Great choice. Great choice. Obviously, Jeremy.
My number 3 is Abbey Road, the album that set the stage for the 70s in so many ways. From this, the production is slick, but it's rich. Just every sound is so perfectly curated. I love the sound of it. And I actually give the medley a lot more praise than has been said here earlier. I think it's just incredible how they stitch together all these songs. And a lot of them are just fun. I think Me and Mr. Mustard and Polythene Pam are just fun. Lennon just kind of creating these characters out of a fever dream. Golden Slumbers is absolutely beautiful. And then carry that weight into the end. It can still get me out of my chair. And when they're dueling on guitars with Eric Clapton joining, John, Paul, George, Eric, and just the way they play off each other, it's almost a cutting contest. Who can rip off the best 4 bars or whatever it is? It's just so good. I love it. And even Ringo's drum solo, you need that to lead into that. That was another thing people made fun of when I was in school. Oh, George, Ringo's trying to do a drum solo. Listen to that. It's so terrible. There was this whole myth about Ringo being a
But
bad
there we
drummer.
go, and appreciate he's a great drummer, isn't he? Quite right.
Ridiculous. One of the best drummers ever. We've talked about, Maxwell and Octopus's Garden, they're fun, a little goofy. Oh, Darling can get a bit repetitive, his sort of soda shop fantasy.
Now, Oh, Darling is clearly influenced.
I think he fixes it in a way by just making his vocals so deranged. It almost becomes like a stalker song.
I was going to say that, Oh, Darling, it clearly influences 10cc. You can absolutely hear it straight off with a number of their songs. Yeah. You can clearly...
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's like I said, it sets the stage for the 70s in so many different ways. And I Want You She's So Heavy. Absolutely fantastic, as Rod said. It just, when they go into that groove, that almost bossa nova thing, it's just so great. And the way it ends with that white noise wipe.
It's also the last song they ever recorded together, isn't it? Is a 4-piece. And with Billy Preston on keys. Now, it would have been fascinating to see where they went, because that's an incredible song, in my opinion.
I have some bootlegs of that song where John and Billy are really dueling, going back and forth, just pure joy at making music together. And I think, Paul, Ringo, and George just kind of let those two men do their thing. And once in a while, listen to those bootlegs and think about what could have been had they gone on and gotten more free of pop music machinery in a way. So it's just a great album. Yeah, and like you said, the cover, it's iconic. What a way to go out on the last thing they made, and not the last thing they released, but definitely that's the one where they said, we're going to turn up everything and make it perfect, and they did.
Yep.
Stars.
Excellent. Pete?
My number 3 is Rubber Soul. Again, 5-star masterpiece. The 2 weakest tracks, like What Goes On and Run for Your Life, for me, if they put Day Tripper and We Can Work It Out, which were recorded in the
that would have been
session,
outrageous.
That would have been outrageous. That wouldn't have been allowed. Too good. But again, they thought they didn't want to rip the fans off, so there's no singles on the album.
I could have pushed it up to number one.
Yes, aye.
Mm.
As you've said, like the soul influence, like the Motown influence, like I think George Harrison said, "Drive My Car." His guitar work on there was influenced by Otis Redding. The Word is a great funky song. Some of the John songs are In My Life, like what a tune.
Yeah.
But
Johnny
I think
Cash's version, great as well. May I just throw that in
yeah,
there?
aye.
What
Nowhere
did they play at
Man,
graduations before In
Norwegian
My
Wood.
Life?
Yeah. I think it's the first album where they actually give George's songs a little bit more respect. If I Needed Someone and Think for Yourself, like the harmonies on those songs, they've actually put a lot of work into those. Where I think they might have thought earlier, oh, George's songs, it's just a George song, we'll not bother with that one, we'll give it a couple of hours. But they've actually put some real work into the George songs on this album, which is great. And that carries on to the next album, Revolver, which was released the following year. George gets even more respect on that one. So yes, Rubber Souls, my number 3. I absolutely love the album. And if Brian Wilson likes it, I'm not going to complain. It was one of his favorite albums. So
Yeah, my number 3 is Abbey Road. I was really torn between this and my next one. I really was, but I've gone with this. And you've said everything I want to say really, because it is a brilliant album. I mean, yeah, George just shines, doesn't he? He really does. I mean, yeah, I mean, something is just brilliant, and I have to say it's better than Clapton's Riposte with Layla. I have to say. Um, I love obviously Come Together with Ringo's drumming at the beginning. Nobody ever gets it right because they don't realize he's left-handed, so he has a totally different feel on the drums. He starts off with a different hand. It's great. The technical rubbish thrown in there. I absolutely, as I say, I don't mind Maxwell Silverhammer. It's not the best. I would have probably replaced it with Come and Get It. I love Oh Darling. I actually really, really like Octopus Garden, and it's probably my favorite Ringo song, along with the Yellow Submarine. Here Comes the Sun, great. We've mentioned it. I love the medley. I think it's brilliant. It's so. When I saw McCartney, he did most of it as well live. He was brilliant. I mean, You Never Give Me Your Money and Golden Slumbers carry that weight. There's 3 of those songs are. I think they're as good as anything they ever did. I really do. I think it's absolutely magnificent. You mentioned the prog sort of sound of I Want You. It goes off a little bit. It's mad. It's brilliant. And then Sun King as well, with that little sort of bit in the middle. It's very Fleetwood Mac. I mean, they were obviously the in band at the time, and obviously they've taken a big chunk of Albatross in terms of the sound anyway, and sort of transported there. Yeah, you've got the throwaway songs with Polythene Palm and She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, but they sort of work on it as well. It's a top draw album, and you could argue it's possibly, I would probably argue alongside, I'd probably argue alongside Aladdin Sane, it's the most, it's the most famous album cover of all time as well. It's such an iconic sleeve, isn't it? It's just incredible. But yeah, what a great album. Number 3 there, Abbey Road, top draw. Rod, we've got number 2.
Well, it's toughy. Yeah, photo finish this was. I've got the White Album at number 2 by a nostril hair, probably. So it's a disparate. I put disparate, sprawling experiment, and it is hit and miss. There's no question it's hit and miss. You know, I think Jeremy's had it already, and you've got Wild Honey Pie, you've got, you know, Piggies, and there's some stuff on there they're just experimental and kind of mucking about. But there was a lot of tension at the time, wasn't there? And they all write songs individually, and then brought them all together rather than working together, and it gives it a different flavour altogether. That whole, you know, the way they worked on this album, you kind of tell it's got a completely different feel, and it is more experimental. But as much as Sgt. Pepper was influential, I think this is a massively influential album, though, just because of it's just so diverse.
You listen to bands like Blur and Radiohead and all these modern bands now, or well, less modern, yeah. But they all divert into different sounds all the time on the albums. There's no one, very rare you get a set thing, and it all stems back to this for me.
And as you know, I like Radiohead a lot, and Happiness Is a Warm Gun. Tom York directly referenced Happiness Is a Warm Gun when he made Paranoid Android, because he wanted to make a you know, a 3/4 structured song, suite almost, I suppose you'd call it. But it was based on that, and that's a favourite song of mine. Happens as a Warm Gun. I think side one. I know there's 4 sides on this, which again I suppose it is hit and miss, but because there's a lot of songs, it's 31 songs I think or something, you know, short and long, you know. But yeah, I think side one might be possibly my favourite Beatles side one of the White Album. You know, Happens as a Warm Gun, Dear Prudence. I made a note of Bungalow Bill because I'm not a massive fan of their frivolous things, like When I'm 64, Octopus's Garden. I mentioned Maxwell Silvana. But Bungalow Bill, although it's a bit silly and it's sort of fun, it's kind of, the topic's quite serious. John Lennon, it was about hunting large game and things.
Yeah.
He's seen a story or a documentary or something, and he wrote sort of tongue in cheek about, you know, this sort of bloke in suburbia go, what have you killed today, kind of thing. And although it is fun, it's semi-serious, and it's got, you know,
Yoko's voice works really well on it as well, bizarrely.
So Back in the USSR is the first track, isn't it? And then While My Guitar Gently Weeps is on the first side as well. It's just,
yeah,
when you just list the songs, it's like it's absolutely incredible side, I think, that side of songs. And then you've also got Blackbird, and beautiful song. I love I Will. Julia's lovely.
Julia, lovely.
Great song. Julia's a great song. I'm So Tired.
Mm.
I like I'm So Tired. I think it's a great song as well. And I haven't even mentioned Helter Skelter, which, you know, that was heavy beyond heavy for them and for then, really, I suppose. You know, you had the Kinks and you had heavy metal, you know, heavy riffs, but that was beyond heavy. I think McCartney wanted to make something ludicrously heavy. He shouts, "I've got blisters on my fingers" at the end, doesn't he? I think John Lennon, in a sort of comical way. But and yeah, it's so, I don't know, it's sort of majestically mad, but fantastic. And some of the songs on it are just, no one else could have done that. And to do it then, you know, to go from Please Please Me to that in 5 years, it just makes your cerebellum just dissolve at the thought, really, to me. And that, it nearly made #1, but not quite, probably because of the misses. But then there's just so many tracks on it, you're not going to have 31, you know, bangers, are you? So there's going to be misses. But it's still, well, I think I had it at #1 in my best double albums of all time, didn't I? So, you know, 5-star album. It's great, and it's my #2 anyway.
Yeah, go watch the double albums. Go watch the double album show, folks.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
I got to get a plug in there, Sid. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. I keep forgetting to mention it. Get all these comments and people haven't subscribed. Jeremy, what have you got at #2?
#2 for me is Rubber Soul. One of the things I love about it is that ultra distinctive sound that spreads through the whole album, this trebly, highly detailed, just the sonic environment that it creates is so distinctive. And Ringo's drumming, instead of just kind of, I think the patterns became more complicated and shorter. So each song had more patterns than ones prior to this, when you think about Help. So, and just those little patterns and rhythms, he never really drummed like that anywhere else except for maybe on Abbey Road, on Come Together, but it's just so creative. The drumming is incredibly creative. I like the use of keyboards too. When you talk about the word being funky, but it also starts to push a little into psychedelia. The way they use the keyboard, it starts to like mess with your head a little bit. It's very cool. And there's, you know, the way George uses the volume pedal on Wait. It's brilliant work on guitar there. It's just just fantastic. One of the best things I ever did was buy the mono remastered version on vinyl. And I remember the first time I played it, Norwegian Wood came on, and I just felt like I was having a religious communion with John Lennon. You know, it's just so present in the room. And they talk about how they really took command in the studio on that album for the first time. And they didn't let the EMI engineers push them around anymore. And, you know, just, they got the sound that they heard in their head that they never heard anywhere else. And they drove everybody, including George Martin, to distraction to get that sound. And it's just so, so perfect. What a fantastic album. Also, we should mention once again an amazing, iconic album cover. And
Yeah.
the story behind it is Robert Freeman is showing them the take on a bent piece of cardboard, and they're like, that one, and make it look like that. Then they walk out and let them figure out how to make it look all stretched out. But
Yeah.
it's just that showing it on a curved surface. They were just like, that's the way we, it's just the brilliance to go along with their instinct on something like that. It's just so great.
The artwork is great, actually, on a number of the albums, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant. Pete, what have you got at number 2?
As Rod said, this is like it was a total photo finish. This was the choice between number 1 and number 2, where I have dithered all week trying to come up with this, and I had to make a choice. So for me, number 2 is Revolver. It's been a favorite of mine since I first started listening to the Beatles when I was probably like 10 or 11 or whatever. It's a total shift from Rubber Soul. Like, Rubber Soul is mainly acoustic guitars. I think up until then, the acoustic guitars had featured really heavily on Beatles albums, and there's hardly acoustic guitar on Revolver. I love the sound of the electric guitars on this album. They work so well, like Lennon and Harrison working off each other. Sometimes it's McCartney as well. McCartney plays quite a bit of guitar on here as well. I think he even does the solo on the George song, which is bizarre. But that solo is fantastic on Taxman. Again, George is like really coming to the fore. He's got like 3 songs on an album. I think it's the first album where McCartney gets more score through the 60s, Paul McCartney. And I think this is maybe the first album where it actually shows. I do love the Lennon songs, though. She Said, and And Your Bird Can Sing. And
Paul's definitely taken over at this point, hasn't he?
The final song. Yes, and then he does Into Pepper. But Rod said earlier about Day in the Life, like a closing song on an album. I think my favourite closing song on any album is Tomorrow Never Knows. I would love to meet somebody and speak who was there and listen to this album in like August 1966 or whatever it was, and hear what they thought on the first time they heard Tomorrow Never Knows. It must have blown people's minds, to use the sort of hippie expression. It blows my mind now. Every time I hear it, and I cannot imagine what it must have been like in 1966 to hear that coming out of your speakers. An incredible piece of work, like a complete masterpiece in every sense of the word, this album. Yes, even Yellow Submarine is great. So a really hard choice between this and my number 1, but I'll if I could have like joint number 1, this would be up there. I absolutely love Revolver. I love the artwork as well. As you just said, the album covers are second to none.
Yeah. Well, my number 2 is Revolver as well. Exactly the same reasons Pete said. And bearing in mind, they also had Paperback Writer and Rain from the same sessions, which are unbelievable songs.
Yeah.
I mean, Paperback Writer is almost like a mod type song, isn't it? It's like the Who. They really do sound like the Who on that at that point. Brilliant.
That's my favourite piece of plastic ever created. Is Paperback Writer and Rain.
It's brilliant, man. Absolutely top
greatest
draw.
singles of all time.
Absolutely great. I mean, as you said, everything there. Taxman, which obviously later clearly influenced the Jam with Start.
Yeah.
Just a little.
just a tad, but it is great. Obviously, you got Eleanor Rigby, of course, and it must have been in McCartney's subconscious, because they found later, didn't that, there was a graveyard with the name Eleanor Rigby on, and McCartney said he didn't know. It does happen, of course. But it's great. I love the use of the vary speed on songs like I'm Only Sleeping. It's really quite clever. George's Love You Too is just so ahead of its time. It's just brilliant. It's absolutely outstanding. Really love that. And then you got the Paul ballad songs like Here, There and Everywhere, beautiful. Yellow Submarine, brilliant. Good Day Sunshine, one of my favorite ever songs. Just, I can't believe it wasn't a single. It's sublime. It really is. Angie Bird can sing another great song. Apparently, Lennon wasn't a big fan of it, which I was really surprised at because I think it's great. And the Jam do a great cover version of it.
Yeah.
They do a top version of it. Yeah, I want to tell. Yeah, brilliant. Tomorrow Never Knows. Got to Get You Into My Life Again. Also equally brilliant as Good Day Sunshine. You know, again, it's almost like a soul song, isn't it? Got to Get You Back in My Life. It's just fantastic. Can't say anything more than that. It's just sheer brilliance. And again, the instrumentation's brilliant. And as you see, the guitar tone, just fantastic. Top album. Often comes in #1 for a lot of people as well. And I think it often comes in as the greatest album of all time as well on a number of these charts. And you can see why. It's hard to argue against it, let's be honest. So it is, yeah, Revolver, my #2. So Rod, what's your #1 then?
Well, because you and Pete have just had it at 2, I'm going to say now.
Oh, sorry.
Revolver. Revolver's my #1, isn't it? So, and you've covered most of it, to be fair. But Eleanor Rigby, you know, it's just the arrangement of it, I suppose. You know, it's not even like any other Beatles song. There's no guitars, and it's you know, the strings, and it's one of my favourite Beatles songs. You know, I know they're overplayed, a lot of these songs. I was going to mention that earlier, the fact that, you know, you get songs by bands that are overplayed, you know, like Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division, or Losing My Religion by REM, and then people say, oh, it's crap now because it's been played 8 zillion times. So it used to be good, but now it's rubbish because it's been overplayed. Well, with the Beatles, instead of having like half a dozen songs that are overplayed, like 60% of their songs are overplayed, aren't they? I mean,
Hey Jude. God.
Hey, but what I mean is all their songs. I mean, it's just like you say, that their catalogue's just in that window of time is just mad, isn't it? And but the reason it edged it for me is, I think there's a consistency. I just love all the songs, you know, the Eleanor Rigby's and Taxman's, but I love Here, There, and Everywhere.
Yeah,
I love I'm Only Sleeping. You know, they're not songs that non-Beatle fans would know, but they're real favourites of mine. They're fantastic songs. Tomorrow Never Knows is a great closer. It's one of their best. It's a top song. It's a top Beatles song, isn't it? And it's unique as well, really, isn't it? Tomorrow Never Knows. Even now in their catalogue, really, it's a pretty unique song. And there's just
sort
not
of
many.
predates the ecstasy crowd, doesn't it, of the late 80s, early 90s, doesn't it?
Yeah,
That sort of song.
yeah, they predate everything in some form or another, don't they?
yeah. The Chemical Brothers ripped off the drum beat, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Yeah.
And I mean, Yellow Submarine, fair enough, overplayed, just a tad. And Dr. Robert, they're arguably the 2 weakest tracks, but it's still got a great guitar groove, Dr. Robert, hasn't it? You know, as a track, the way it bounces along, and as an album, as a single entity, front to back, it just edges the others overall. And it's just got so many of my favourites on it, I suppose. And like I say, that not all the obvious ones, yeah, the Here, There, and Everywhere and stuff. And yeah, it's not really an original choice, Revolver, because, you know, lots of people say it's up there, but rightly so. You know, it's a 5-star album, and, you know, like I say earlier, by a cigarette paper, it's my #1.
Yeah. Well, nobody's going to argue. That's for sure. Jeremy, what have you got #1 then?
Well, there's only one left. Revolver is my #1 as well, for many of the same reasons. It's just the thing that I find interesting is George said that he saw Rubber Soul and Revolver as almost a double album, as almost, whereas I see Revolver as much heavier, much more experimental. When you think about a track like Tomorrow Never Knows, it still sounds futuristic today. It just takes your head off, from the tape loops to the drum beat to those, you know, Tibetan Book of the Dead inspired lyrics from John Lennon. It's just an incredible piece of music, especially when you think that just, you know, 2 years earlier they were mop tops. You know, they were seen as kids, and then they're just up there with the highest art of high art.
Yeah,
It's the most stunning trajectory, I think, in culture. And Your Bird Can Sing, that Baroque guitar riff, it's just mind-blowing. One of my favorite things about that song is Wilco did a full covers concert, I have a bootleg of, where every song was a cover that was selected by the audience. And they do And Your Bird Can Sing, and they do it, and it sounds okay, but Jeff Tweedy was not satisfied. He's like, let's do that again. And then they do it and they perfect it. And that's when you realize that it's not an easy song to play,
Yeah.
especially live, to get all those guitars working together that way. And I just love that song. I love the whole album. Taxman, what a bitterly beautiful or beautifully bitter song. People, I've read people on the line talking about, oh, here he is, this rich man complaining about the taxes. Yeah, but can't you relate as a non-rich person with
He was
taxes?
paying 90 something pence in
Yeah,
the
and they
pounds
right
tax.
the
Not a
taxation
small amount,
situation
like.
there
95
was,
pence out of a
yeah,
pound.
here's a
Right.
medal, and now give me all your money. You've done so much for British culture. Now give me all your money.
Yeah.
It's not really the best way to, that's why everybody left and became tax exiles.
Yeah.
But I love that bitter, dark side of George. And yes, one of the greatest guitar solos of all time, played by McCartney, and it's so great that it just put it on again at the end.
Yeah.
Not many people get away with that. Yeah, it's just an absolute masterpiece. The second LP I ever owned was the
Oh.
American version. I got it from my 12th birthday along with my first stereo. What a great thing to have. I'd obviously heard it before that, but when you own something, you get into a little bit more. And that's when I realized what a fantastic record it was. Definitely one of the greatest records of all time. I'm not going to go there and say it's number one. There's a lot of competition, but it is today's number one. 5 stars for Revolver by the Beatles.
Brill. Pete, what's your number one then?
Well, my favorite Beatles album and my favorite album of all time, as I said, just by a whisker, is the White Album. If I was stranded, I know they do Desert Island discs. If I was stranded on a desert island and I could take one album with me, I would take the White Album, and I think it would cover every base, every musical base I could ever want. From punk, I'm sure the end of Everybody's Got Something to Hide goes into punk somewhere. Like they've got heavy metal, you've got like 1920s music hall, you've got like avant-garde, Revolution 9. It's like the beautiful ballads like Julia and Blackbird, and soulful guitar tunes like While My Guitar Gently Weeps with Eric Clapton on, and as you've said, like openers like Back in the USSR, Dear Prudence, Glass Onion, great trio of songs and the way they sort of fade into each other. I just love the eclectic nature of this. It is a beast. It is like you never know what's coming next. You've got absolutely no idea. It just like slaps you around the face every time you listen to it. It's like, wow, like it is like a whirlpool. It's just an incredible listen, start to finish, including Revolution 9. It's like not something I would put on every day, but when you listen to it in the context of the album, it all just fits together. And yes, there was songs recorded where there was only 2 Beatles there because the others couldn't be bothered to turn up. Paul would go off into like Studio 3 of Abbey Road or something because they were busy working on a John song, and then Studio 2. But it completely works. The songwriting's amazing. They've been to India for a couple of months and written all these amazing songs, which I think the bloke on the elephant with his gun and stuff, Bungalow Bill, was all this Indian influence. And they've just written so many songs on acoustic guitar. And I think when you write songs like that, rather than sort of jam them in a studio, they become like they are standalone songs. Like, so when they do the demos, the Escher demos, which were released as part of the sort of wider package, the songs stand up as little acoustic demos, and they get even better when they're done in Abbey Road. I just love the White Album. I will never get bored of that album. How could you? So many different styles in there. How could you get bored of that? So yes, my number one album of all time and my favorite Beatles album, the White Album.
Yeah, it's also my number one. It was number one when I was born, which I mentioned on one of the shows. It just contains so many different genres, as you say: rock, blues, ska, folk, psychedelia, it's avant-garde. It's just a bit of metal. It's just mad. And we mentioned the Blur and the Radiohead thing earlier on there as well. How it's really the album of the future. A lot of other albums or styles or bands have taken it from this sort of album. As you said, everything I want to say about most of the tracks on there, but I'm going to stand up for Martha, My Dear, which I absolutely love. I love Rocky Raccoon. I love the whimsy sort of side of McCartney. I'm a big fan of it. And if you I've had to pick between John and Paul, it's probably going to edge for Paul, if I'm being honest. I just love that sort of thing that he does. Obviously, you've got Blackbird, which is beautiful and has the message with regards to race. It's just fabulous. I just love the whole album. Yeah, even some of the Dafter songs. I mean, I told the anecdote on the last show when why don't you do it in the middle of the road when my band used to do it live and we used to die on our backside doing it. You see, we're doing a Beatles song and going, yeah, you do it, and they're just looking, staring at you. But it's just a great song, and then that story about my mate who used to play Revolution Number 9 on loop in the pub. Which drive people mental, but it's just it's a fabulous album. It really is, and there's other songs that could have gone onto it. I mean, Lady Madonna, one of my favorite Beatles songs, could have been on it. Hey Jude could have been on it. You know, you could have had a number of other tracks on it if you'd wanted. And there's a number of tracks that didn't make that feature on later albums, of course, that could have been on as well. I think Across the Universe is another one that could have been on, and so on and so forth.
John was writing Jealous Guy. I think it was
Guy,
Child
Mother
of Nature.
Nature's, So you've got all of them. It's just an incredible album. It really is, as Pete rightly said, and you've all rightly said. It's God's sake, it's the Beatles. You know, what more do you want in life? The White Album. It's not an album that immediately grabs you like some of the others. It's not like Revolver or Rubber Soul. It doesn't immediately grab you and go, "Oh, this is unbelievable." It's a proper grower of an album. So yeah, and for me, it's the one that a few years ago when I first listened to it, it wouldn't have been anywhere near the top. But as the year goes on, it just gets better and better and better, and it's just unbelievable. So there we go, folks. There are our choices. A bit of a split at the top there. I think Revolver just edges it though, in overall adding up votes. But what a band, what a set of choices. So let us know your lists as well, folks. Remember, please subscribe to the channel. That's my plea for this evening. Let us know your lists. And until the next time, from Rod, Jeremy, Pete, and myself, take care and goodbye. Bye-bye.